Welcome to Asian Like Me, presented by me, Dr. Sohee Jun, the podcast for the modern Asian woman redefining what it means to thrive. I've spent years navigating the complexities of culture, family expectations, and career ambitions. Here, we have real, unfiltered conversations with incredible women who are breaking barriers, charting their own paths, and owning their power. Together, we'll dive into the wins, the lessons, and the challenges we all face. And yeah, we'll laugh. We'll share stories and drop some actionable tips to help you crush it in your own way. This is your space to feel seen, heard, and inspired. Ready to rewrite the rules? Let's drop in. Hi, Jerry.
Hi. Hi, Sohee.
It is really good to be in conversation with you. It's been a year since I've seen you, and for our listeners, we met at a mutual friend's book launch, and it was a pretty exciting book launch. It was the Ed Sheeran concert, so not a
I don't
bad
know if
way
it
to
was
meet.
a book release party with the concert or a concert with the book release party, but nonetheless, it was a good time hosted by our friend Paul.
That's right. And here's why I'm so excited. You, as I shared before we started recording, you are the first Asian male on my podcast. Woo woo!
It's a big honor.
It is. And I was very selective about who I wanted that person to be. And Jerry, you have such a dynamic career, which, if people haven't told you that, you should know. And I also see you as a very prolific person who's doing really incredible work around amplifying Asian American stories and all of the great things that we're doing out there. So I feel very aligned to you, is what I'm saying.
Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah. So let's start with the first question I ask every guest, which is what is currently lighting you up?
Right now, I'm actually in the middle of or in the beginning stages of writing a book, and that's exciting. I don't know when this episode will go live, but I haven't shared the news publicly yet, but it will come out of the bag at some point. I'm writing a book, and it is a part of the continuation of the journey of both owning my own story and hopefully having that be a catalyst for other people to be inspired to continue to do. And so, really excited for that. That book should come out early 26. It's on storytelling and empowerment through that, and super excited.
Yeah, okay, good. I wanted to make sure that we got that right in case people are like, oh my gosh, it's Jerry's book out. By the way, you know I've written two books and I love that you're writing one. Now, did you get nudged by Naren, another mutual friend of ours?
Yes and no. I explored a couple different options, and I'm writing it with Wiley, and it'll be a fun process. But I did explore traditional publishing, hybrid publishing, and then all that good stuff. And I think also this is an interesting time to write a book with the AI things in that regard. We get to do the things that I don't know, and this is a part of the entire story for me in doing what I do now. Things that I think it's a popular thing for Asian folks to say, immigrants to say when we do things like this. And we're also generally geared to be a little bit more humble. And so it's the thing that we are expected to say is, oh, I didn't think that we could write a book, or I'm doing things that were not a part of our world to us. But I think while that's a nice thought to say, the other part is like, why the hell not? And then why not? Why shouldn't more of us write books? Why shouldn't more of us have our stories be told? And part of this is to normalize people who look like me and you who have not only great content to share, but through the context that is only available to us. Because this part of this entire journey or the genesis of it was continuing to realize and to be reminded all throughout my life, but really poignantly about 6 years ago, that I had been allowing myself to be conditioned and to be taught all things about business and life and leadership through the lens of a whole bunch of people that knew nothing about what it was to live my life. Right. And whether you are talking about the education system or what is in mainstream media or what is put on pedestals as these beacons of insight and smart people who, whether it's books or podcasts or otherwise, that have, oh, this is the foremost go-to person on leadership. And shocker to none of us listening, they don't look like me, they don't look like you.
Yeah.
And it was realizing that about 6 years ago, 5.5 years ago, when I decided to go into this all in, was I then refused to accept this idea that my own kids are going to have the same lack of choice or lack of available options in learning about life and business and all the things from a storytelling perspective when Appa and Amma and all their friends have done cool stuff. Because I think when I was growing up, we obviously very different times in our collective community journey from an immigration and evolution perspective.
Jerry, were you
We
born here in the States?
I was born in Korea. I came here when I was 8 in 92. And back then technology was not as available for us to be able to create content where we could democratize and go straight to the consumer. Everything was a permission driven society. And so obviously back then, as it is the case, a little bit better now, but still much the same, that people who greenlight or give permission for people to write on major publications or to be seen in movies or TV shows don't look like us, don't understand the nuances of our experience. Or we are continually told that our product will not have the same reach in the market. So we're
Yeah.
not relevant. We don't have the resonance to carry, which is fine. That's their own bias. And then, too, frankly, back 30 years ago, I don't think that we had as much, as many awesome people who've done interesting things with whose stories that we could share. And even going back 5 years when I started Dears and Americans and got really into Asian American storytelling, that was the actual thing that I was trying to disprove. That, in fact, we do cool stuff. We do non traditional things. And we can, even if you wanted to stay in the traditional path, the advice that's given has to be through the lens of our unique experience,
That's right.
right? Because the singular narrative of just work harder or the lazy advice of the most privileged people on this planet telling other people that if I can do it, you can do it is not only lazy, but it's also very dangerous.
Mhm.
As when you tell somebody with less privilege that if I can do it, you can do it, then, and it doesn't work because it's not supposed to,
And you end up
then
yourself.
exactly. And we never really question the systems or the circumstance. And look, I'm a very fortunate and blessed, educated Korean man. And so
Yay.
even in the spectrum of Asian American, I know where I stand in the spectrum of privilege. And
Yeah.
so I own that. And so the whole point of this is to encourage other people to find their own voice and to find the power of their own story. Because what the hell do I know about being anything but me?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is why I love this question so much because you have shared like a million golden nuggets within that one question of what's currently lighting you up. First of all, again, congratulations on writing the book. I am so aligned with you. Every one of us has a unique perspective, and yours will be more nuanced and different than me, even though I'm
Sure.
Korean. I'm a female and I have different experiences than you being a male. I really want to unpack your experience as a Korean male. You said you came here at 8. I was also early immigrant, and it's interesting what you said about the whole mantra of like, why not you? And that's been something that I've said so recently in the past year, why not me? And it has opened up a whole world of other possibilities that I haven't even considered, which is also very exciting. Tell me more about what happened 6 years ago that you were like, you know what? I'm going all in.
Yeah. So I spent 10 years in sales and marketing post undergrad,
Mhm.
then decided to go to business school and graduated with an MBA from Michigan in 2017. The personal life parallel is that I got married just before business school and we had our first child during business school. So we came back. And as you're supposed to, or as you should, or expected to do with an MBA, you're supposed to do something challenging and corporate. And so I did that. Did
Business.
consulting that came with full-time travel for a while. Hated it, not only the lifestyle, but also didn't believe in the work. Tried a couple different things. And in August of 2019, just about 2 years after I was supposed to have this illustrious post MBA corporate career, I was fired. And we had our first was almost 2 years or 3 years old at the time. Our second was 6 months old. And it was this sort of, okay, what the hell do I do now? Obviously, the pragmatic thing to do fiscally and whatever is to go get another job and to fill that gap and then all that stuff. And I did not do that. If you ask my wife, she'll tell you a very different version of the story, which is probably more
Yes.
true than my version.
I know your wife.
But
I've
my
met, so I will
yeah,
ask her.
but my version of the story is I said, hey, like let me, the bonus is that I get to spend a little bit of time at home with the newborn as well. But let me try to figure something out for 6 months. And if I can't get it off the ground or make it sustainable, then yeah, I'll go get another job. This was August and September of 2019. It was then I got really serious creating content on LinkedIn, sharing my thoughts and all the things corporate life, business school life, dad life, life as an Asian American, and launched a different podcast in early 2020. Converted that energy and the lessons and the passion into what was Dear Asian Americans in early March. Launched that on March 2nd, which is our daughter's first birthday. 10 days later, COVID happens, the world goes to crap. And I was in the interview process with a couple companies at the final round.
Yeah.
Everybody froze and nothing happened. I had the conviction and I had the idea. But frankly, if you look at the history or the pathway of how this became a thing, a lot of it was due to circumstances completely outside of my control. And frankly, it was, you don't have a job anyway. So, go do this. And so daycare closed, kids were home. My wife's in healthcare, so she had to continue to work. And combining all that, I was like, okay, let's keep doing this. The non-practical and the non-business side of it was also at a time when Asian people were getting attacked
Yes,
for
I remember that.
for
Were you
yeah,
scared
for
in doing this endeavor and taking that risk? It's a risk. Were you?
not yes and no. When we look back at it, COVID was a 2-year thing, but
Yeah,
in the moment it was a 3-week thing that just kept getting renewed.
that's
And
right.
so there was this idea of, oh, it'll just be temporary. Obviously, none of us knew that. I'm not shy away from sharing. At the time, I was still collecting unemployment from the job that I was fired from. And so financially, things happened, including student loans being paused and daycares being closed and the
Yeah,
unemployment thing being extended, where it gave me a financial runway that I otherwise would not have had. Our expenses were minimized because nobody was doing anything.
buying toilet paper.
Yeah, and it was a low risk environment to continue to prove this idea out. In hindsight, the only interesting insight from all of this was that a lot of the people who were doing work in the community spaces, whether it was through amplification of stories or organizing or all these things, there was this sort of, we need to do this for each other because we need it. And one of the things that, good and bad, is that there wasn't a priority on making this a commercially viable thing,
Oh,
right? And so because the priority was to be there for the people, right? And so,
stories.
I did 50 episodes of The Years Americans in the first 100 days,
Oh,
which
wow.
is insane. Yep, I was doing multiple episodes a day, sometimes recording because anyone looked like everybody was home. Nobody was gonna say no.
That's true.
Like
But also, like, Jerry, did you have, maybe it wasn't stated or obvious, did you have goals and desires for Dear Asian Americans?
yes and no. I knew it was gonna work. You just don't know when it's gonna work. And so
Like, what did that
my
mean?
goals in two different ways, right? I think one, from a holistic perspective, I wanted to create a platform where everyday Asian Americans could come and tell their story. I wanted other people to be inspired to start their own platforms. From a business perspective, lofty, like a pie in the sky goals, turn it into some other project, whether it would have been a TV show or a book or something like that. But again, those ideas, the latter ideas of the business component, we were just living in a very emotionally charged environment where, part of it, to be frank, was internalized gaslighting from our own community, which was, we're all just trying to survive. Why are you trying to monetize something like this?
Oh,
And not directly, it was really hard to talk about building it as a business because people
I could,
needed it.
yeah, I could sense that. It was more of a, you felt the overarching, it's like the meta goal of I'm meeting the community needs that we,
Yeah,
at the time, is in the zeitgeist for all of the othered groups. There was a lot
sure.
going on. I'm wondering, by the way, low-key, you inspired me as I was watching the podcast and all the things that you do online. It inspired me and got me off the fence about doing a podcast too, which is of the same vein of amplifying stories. By title, you're a keynote speaker, you're a speaker coach, you help people with personal branding. I'm wondering, is any of the podcast stuff going into your book? Is it feeding one or the other?
I was very aggressive with the timeline, mainly because that was my de facto full time job for the first year. I had nothing
Yeah,
else to do.
yeah.
So I did 50 episodes in 100 days. I did 100 episodes in a year.
Wow.
Yeah, which is crazy. but kept the process simple, all these things, and made it work. It turned into, in 2021, speaking opportunities at companies. Again, in the moment, you don't know what you don't know. 2021 was actually the year that sort of awakened the conscience of corporate America to the Asian American experience. The pivotal moment was the murders in Atlanta. There were some other unfortunate events that happened that really just shook the culture of America and said, hey, we need to talk about this.
Remember that time vividly. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was shocking. And I think the Asian diaspora is very complicated, diverse. And so, particularly amongst the Korean American community, it was like, ah, crap, like us too. Because previous to that, to be honest, I think it was just a lot of othering because the victims of the high profile things that were happening were not directly impacting the Korean community.
Yeah, so we were watching it, and then when it happened in our community, I remember the stories and thinking it was a surreal moment. The palpable fear as I was coaching women that are mainly Asian, those are my clients that I coach, and they're like, they were in fear, like even if they're not in Atlanta, just the notion that it
Oh,
happened.
sure. Yeah. And it could have been, I mean, it was very complex, right? One, they were Korean. Two, it's like the more you think about it, it's like, why were they doing those jobs in the first place? And why did they have to do those jobs in a pandemic? And obviously, race played a factor, and the mainstream media wasn't. But what that led to on the aftermath of it was that that was March 17th of 2021 that then really opened this opportunity for corporate America, particularly employee resource groups and other DEI initiatives, to talk about the Asian American experience from a corporate lens because people were voicing their opinions. You had more than ever Asian leaders in the business world getting loud, sharing their own stories on LinkedIn and other places. That sort of opened the opportunity. Obviously, in 2025, we live in a very different world when it comes to these topics. But at the time, I say May, but during Heritage Month season of 2021, I ended up doing about 50 speaking gigs across the month, plus or minus a few weeks.
How is that
Um,
even
it
possible?
was all virtual. One, it was all virtual.
Okay, that helps.
Yeah, two, whatever it was from the last week of April to the first week of
Yeah.
June. But there was this demand of, hey, come talk to us about some of the things that we never learned. Statistics about the experiences of Asian Americans in the workplace, the progression, frankly, the history lessons that we never learned, and really like how do we make sense of what we see in the news?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter whether you're Asian or not in this country. The reality is that none of us have ever and still don't educate ourselves enough about the unique experiences of what it means to be Asian. And so that was the aha moment of, hey, this worked. Like, what does that mean? When I say it worked, it meant that I figured out a way to make this revenue generating business opportunity for me and my family because it wasn't the podcast itself and obviously there are many different ways to monetize a podcast, but
Yeah.
frankly, I guess strictly from a direct perspective, we didn't have listenership numbers to command large brand deals or advertisements and looked at me doing the podcast and then being loud on LinkedIn as the sort of the reputation builder to have a speaking business. Right?
That's
And so
real. Yeah.
it was all tied together.
Well,
So it will all be in the book in some way, shape, or form. It is largely a book about self-empowerment and empowerment through of communities through storytelling and owning our own voice. It's not an Asian American book. I do want it to be relatable to a broad swath of people.
yeah.
The stories of the people that I will highlight are obviously going to be people who I know and I know better. And then there happens to be a correlation between that group of people and people who are in my community and other communities that I care deeply about.
Yeah, I can't wait for the book to come out. Look, my personal mantra is that I coach from lived experience, and it also happens to resonate with people that are not women, men. And so I think anytime we can serve or do something and it becomes a career type thing through our own lived experience, the more power that gives our stories and that gives us and our communities. So I applaud you for doing that. I want to fast forward to the current culture of DE&I because I'm calling it the cancel culture of DE&I. What's your take on it? I obviously read about what's going on, and I know you do too. So, what do you think? What's your POV?
I think obviously it is unfortunate that we have come to a place where the things that make the country wonderful, our community is amazing, and frankly, what makes business more money is being targeted and weaponized for an agenda. DEI, and you have to call it what it is, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is to make sure that more people's voices are heard. And it's not just one thing, but it's an endless amount of programs and cultural things, both in the business and society world, that makes people have opportunity. And it's not just a racial issue that is often painted in media. It's what got women the right to vote. It's what got people equal rights. It is what got people with different abilities, physical access to spaces. It's been unfortunate because I think it has done already in a few short weeks, undone a lot of work that was done through both parties and both types of both sides through the last few administrations to really highlight that. And what I think is really unfortunate from a longstanding impact of this is that it is going to discourage younger people and people from speaking up because there has been and there will continue to be proven real life impact from a business and other perspective of speaking up for things that people believe in, right?
Yeah, I hear that. I think I've lived long enough to see DE&I in all of the different ways that it's titled come and go. And my lens on it is that there is a group of people that get more empowered and emboldened to continue the work. So I think a lot of it depends on where you decide to look. So certainly, initiatives and programs are being cut. That is the reality. I also know of a lot of companies that have doubled down on their commitment. And that's where I want to look because people like you, Jerry, you continue to do the work and share stories and speak about your experience, which I want to get to. What is it like to be a Korean American male these days? And also me doing this podcast in what some people would call a very inopportune time. And again, it's not about opportunity for me. It's about we need the stories now more than ever. So yes, I don't deny that it may discourage younger generations, but I also think that more of them will be emboldened and inspired to do this work because it is being canceled in many ways. Again, depends on how you look at it, right?
It is, and I don't speak for anybody else except me, and don't speak for all Asian men or anybody outside of me and my experience. I think in this moment, it is important to think about how other groups, whether it's groups from our own community in history or other groups who have gone through challenging times, have waited their own versions, right? Meaning, we live in an extremely impatient society.
We
Everything is
do.
instant. Everything is press a button today and it shows up 5 minutes from now. And everything seems like a fire drill. And maybe it is. Maybe it's by design. However, things don't happen overnight. And we need to make sure that whatever cause you want to stand for, whatever fight you want to be in, that you are committed to this in the long run. Right. And so we think about people in America who've suffered injustices for decades. And the resolve that they had to make sure that they were continuing to move their needle forward while taking care of their own immediate livelihood needs. I have a very incomplete understanding of it because of a lot of things, but I think about our grandparents who were born into occupation, who suffered through war and migration and immigration after that. And for us to fall or to wither away or to fall back because of what's going on now, it seems a little disrespectful, to be honest, to our grandparents who suffered more and who are willing to risk a lot more.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of people who I think see the headlines and saying, oh, maybe we shouldn't talk about XYZ.
Mm.
And I say, and then we live in a different world where a lot of our opinions look recording a podcast for public consumption, right? And the idea of people's thoughts and opinions being public versus private is a completely different ballgame today.
It is.
But there are still people who are committed to it. The media will continue to portray sensational headlines, which are companies and schools and institutions that are falling in line with demands. But there are still companies committed to it. My May, from a speaking perspective, frankly, isn't as busy as it used to be, but it is filled with events with partners, corporate partners, academic partners who still believe in the power of our story.
Yeah, and
Um,
doesn't that mean more because their values are on display, and those are the people
they
that
are.
you work with.
But I think the reality too is that they assume the risk, right? They want to stand on the right side of history, but at the same time, they know that they are making a decision, a business decision to stand.
Yeah.
I don't agree with what they are doing, But I also don't want to completely paint in a binary form that everybody else who's not doing it is evil, because there are long games to be played, and there are reasons far beyond my understanding of why leaders of institutions do certain things, right? And so, for example, this seems like forever ago, it was just a few weeks ago, but large consulting companies, Accenture, Deloitte, so on and so forth, announced that they're doing away with DEI, quote, large quotation marks, right? And again, we could sit here and say, oh, they never cared and they're wiping it away, so shame on them. But the reality is that they actually do a ton of business in the billions of dollars with the federal government every year.
Mm.
One of their largest customers is the federal government. And as the executive in charge, who is supposed to be responsible for the livelihood of the health of their business, their revenue, and their employees, it is understandable that they chose the path that doesn't end with immediate laying off of thousands of employees when billions of dollars worth of contracts get canceled overnight.
Yeah,
And
that's a lot of grace that we're giving and a lot of understanding. And I think some who are, I'm going to call it jaded, will say, then you're just kowtowing to the dollars or going where the dollars are. And the reality is, there's livelihood, to your point, people's lives at stake, jobs at stake. So there are decisions, hard decisions that have to be made. And I think it's to your point, and what I'm painting is looking at the broader picture and the broader story, opening up the aperture to create some understanding rather than clickbait headlines and making judgment here and there around it.
again, we don't know anything, right? And do I know better than the CEO of a company that employs 700,000 people? No. Do I? And again, I think it is an incomplete thought. And again, I'm not excusing any of it, but again, I am not privy to all the information, nor am I in their position of having to make an extremely impossible, difficult choice. Look, the school that I went to for grad school, Michigan, announced 2 weeks ago that they're doing away with DEI across the board. Their
Mhm.
university president is Asian American, who I
Mhm.
happen to know personally. The announcement was surprising to me because it values perspective wise, it stood at odds with who I know him to be. Again, am I going to blame him? I don't know. I don't think I can, because I don't understand the complexity of the decision. And again, it is not to say that I excuse it or that endorse it, but
And I think
uh,
that's where it's really interesting because that's where you can invite in conversation, Jerry. I love that expansiveness of I don't know. It might sound trite to others. It's the I don't know, and I want to have a conversation around it. That's the next piece of it for me, where if you don't know, and it is surprising, and there are some decisions that are maybe at odds with your values, maybe again, to your point, we don't know the whole story. So, where can we invite in conversation that creates more understanding and a bridge between the not knowing and all of that? So I appreciate that. I really have to get to this around, it's a pivot, but like the male Asian experience, because it's been mostly females thus far. And so let's pull the thread on this one. And being a Korean male, Jerry, what is it like these days to be you?
again, I can't speak for anybody else except me.
That's
I
okay.
don't speak for all men or the patriarchy.
Nope.
However, do also agree that men generally can obviously do a much better job making space. And so I think there's a nuanced but extremely important distinction between speaking for people and speaking up for people. I think culturally, because broadly speaking, we are still very much in line with our heritage cultural values, even though we exist in America. I think there are extremely rooted expectations of traditional gender roles that have been conditioned through family, society, culture, religion in certain cases.
And what is that? What were you told growing up? I want to know what you consciously were told or picked up and unconsciously picked up.
Look, again, it's just my own personal experience,
Yeah.
right? Like our Korean culture is very patriarchal. Though I no longer subscribe, I was raised in the church where all the leaders were men and women were expected to play certain roles and not expected to play certain roles. I think that we, again, consciously and unconsciously were taught that men had certain roles and men could aspire to be certain things, where women and daughters were expected to choose different paths. I have a wife, I have a mom, I have a daughter. I've had to unlearn a lot of these things.
How
I've
did
had
you
to
start?
challenge myself with a lot of things.
How did you
Um,
start that unlearning process? I'm really curious.
it's hard to answer these questions about unlearning and things without coming off as somebody who is wagging his finger at other people.
Yeah.
Again, I this is just my own experience, and
Yeah.
life in and of itself is challenging, but I think it's hard not to have moments of ahas and clarity and empathy as you live life. And we're seeing a lot of it now with this expectations of gender norms in the societal discourse. And not just here, even in Korea, right? There is a huge movement of younger men, particularly having more conservative values and blaming some of their own circumstances on the feminist movement and becoming extremely more conservative ideologically. That's been in a lot of studies and research,
Oh, wow.
and through at how they vote politically.
Yeah.
Young white men turned way right over the last 8 years. And if you look at the Korean elections, there was a lot of younger men who the gap between younger generations divided by gender when it comes to political ideology is getting increasingly larger.
Mm.
Unfortunately, I think it's hard to not have the opportunities to think about these things as you live life. And again, I don't want to sound like, oh, I'm better than anybody, but
Don't.
as you meet people, as you befriend people from both genders and from different cultures, as you go through school, as you see the disparate opportunities that one group has versus another, as you both see it anecdotally and see from research and data the different experiences that people have, as you find a mate who, for me, in my own heterosexual relationship, a wife, a woman who experiences life differently, who then has a daughter and is wondering about the different things that she will both be allowed to do and expected to do. How the hell do you not get angry at the world that's been conditioned in this way? And
Oh my gosh.
I don't want to come off as judgmental, but it's, yo, like, just live life because you see how effed up it is, and there's nuance, right? And
You're not coming off judgy at all. I definitely hear what the under theme of what you're saying, which is around empathy and learning from your experiences. And it sounds like you certainly have at least considered all of the people in your life and how wildly different it could be from yours.
yeah, I think it's super complicated, right? So if we're talking about Asian American men in our generation, the millennial-ish generation, we weren't taught a lot of the things. Our grandparents were born under occupation. Our parents were born under the shadows of the war. Then immigration happened. Then survival, literal survival happened. And so you really expect my generation of Korean men in America to have had healthy, emotional, observable traits from our dads? Hell no. And but then, so when younger people get mad about, oh, like Asian parents don't know mental health, wake the hell up and have a little bit of empathy for our generation of parents. And we can't deal with half the crap they dealt with, right? And
Love this perspective very
no,
much.
so like have some grace because we would not survive the crap that they survived with. So once you understand that, then take it upon yourself to learn from other people's stories, to show up. And if you can't keep blaming, oh, it was never modeled for me, right? Because then you just look to your peers. And again, I'm not the best dad in the world. I'm not the best husband in the world. I have a lot of shortcomings of myself, but I have prioritized being the Korean American dad that, not that the kids that I want, not that the dad that I would have wanted, because my dad was awesome or is awesome, but I want to do things that also help challenge the narrative of what a Korean American dad living in Southern California is today.
Yeah.
But again, I have a lot of friends, Korean and otherwise, who still believe in some of the traditional roles, who still are really coming, in my opinion, coming from a place of, I don't know, therefore I'm not going to,
Yeah.
meaning they're, I don't say fear, but just discomfort.
Yeah.
You know what I did yesterday? Like,
Tell
again, I
me.
work for and you know what? You and I don't need to ask anybody's permission for a day off, but my daughter's in kindergarten. Her school went on a field trip to the farm, and I signed up to be a chaperone.
I love it.
And again, I'm not saying that to, oh, I'm a better person. And for the moms listening, don't use that as getting mad at your own husbands. But how, and again, and I'm doing this because I want to, primarily for myself and for my own daughter. Two, and then I've coached a couple of times now my son's little league teams
Yeah.
in our neighborhood. And I do it for a number of different reasons. One, I want to. It makes me feel involved in my kid's life.
Yeah.
Two, it makes my kids feel special. because
And
not everybody
clean.
parent gets to do it.
Yeah.
And two, I have the privilege to do it. I control my own schedule. I don't need to ask anybody's permission. We're blessed to be able to be in a position for me to take the time away to do that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think is ancillary benefits of me showing up in places like this is that I get to show my community in and outside of the Asian American bubble what a Korean American dad looks like.
Yes. And you are
I
really,
grew up in Fullerton.
yeah.
It is the most Korean place in America.
Yes, I know.
At least it was when we were growing up. I went to a school that had letters written home in Korean and English. That's how Korean it was in the early 90s.
Yeah.
I did not have a single Korean coach in any of the sports that I did, not have a Korean American leader in the Boy Scouts or any other leadership thing that I did in quote unquote regular life. Sure,
Mhm.
when you went to church and stuff, it was all Korean. But even in a community, and I know that it's changing and I hope that it continues to change, we don't expect a little league coach to be a Korean person. We don't have that expectation.
Not automatically, no.
Correct. And the only way for us to change it is for us to show the hell up. And so you can't complain. I don't have a right to complain about the fact that I didn't have Asian coaches growing up if I'm not willing to make that decision and show up for myself. And the biggest impact, and again, I'm not trying to be some hero here, it is not in me, it is not in my kids. You know what it is? It is to normalize for the black, white, and brown kids on my team and in my neighborhood that I can be coach, that we normalize that this is what an Asian American man could do.
Yeah.
Because we are still living in a world that defines Asian men and Asian women in this country through the stereotypes of small business owners, of nerds, of people that are not athletically inclined, that are not involved. This will hopefully, I know not all your listeners are moms, but I took a call from a former manager who was a manager in my consulting days, and then we worked together on a project in San Diego. And 3 years ago, I think she happened to email me and she said, "Hey, I have a real big question for you. Can I call you?" And I have a vivid memory, like took the call. I happened to be in Atlanta on a layover and I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" And she's, "Hey," she was involved, heavily involved with the PTA at her kid's school. It's in North County, San Diego. So it's diverse, but it's like white and Asian diverse. She said her school district is about 40% Asian. And she said, but if you look at the involvement of the PTA, they just don't show up. And I'm wondering what we can do for them to show up. And I was like, listen, there's a problem in your wording of your question. Why are you calling them they when the PTA is supposed to be for all? And we talked for a long time, and I tried to be as kind and as gentle as I could without being blunt about it. But I said, you're looking at the PTA as a white moms organization, and because you're getting mad at them for not showing up to your party.
Oh, interesting. And how did she take that?
I said, have you asked them how they want to be involved?
I
Do you
love that.
communicate with them in their language?
Yeah.
Do you have any allies on their side, or are you just blaming them for not showing up? Because the white moms are getting angry saying, we're doing all the work of the PTA, and these Asian kids are showing up to school and coming to our events, and their parents are not doing it. And I said, listen, the world of PTAs don't exist in Asia. They're living under different cultural and economic circumstances. And I said it in the nicest way I could, but after I got off the phone, I was like, this is the problem with you framing the entire experience as mine versus others.
Oh, that's so important.
And so, again, but from the other side, as now somebody who has no excuse. I grew up here. I did Little League. I did basketball. I did Boys and Girls Club growing up. I speak the language. I went to your schools. I live here. I have to show up.
Yeah.
And it's not, again, this is where gender comes into play. And it's just not dads who should show up to coach.
It's
Like,
everyone.
but again, when it comes to youth sports,
I know.
generally it's on the coaching end of things. But do you know how powerful it would be? And it doesn't need to be in cities that are predominantly Asian or whatever. If little things like this, right? We showed up to PTA events, if we showed up to field trips,
Mhm.
if we showed up to read along to your parents, because we were brought up in a world where those things were white mom things. Because being children of immigrants, our parents did not have the luxury, the language, the privilege, the access to be able to do that.
My parents were working 3 jobs each. They did not know if I actually made it to school. And this isn't a
Right.
blame, it's just a different
And so,
experience.
what excuse do we have now? We do not. But we are still living under the expectations and what was normalized for us then of this is what Asian parents do versus not. And so
Well,
again, I don't want to sound judgmental and everybody's got their own stuff. But dude, can you take one, and you can tell this to the men in your life, take a goddamn day off away from making some company more money and go chaperone a field trip.
I'm going to put
It
that in
is,
quotes.
no,
Show
it is
honor.
therapeutic. It does things for you. And so our daughter's kindergarten teacher has been in her job for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a racial thing, it was more of a gender thing about all dads. But it is so good to have a dad on the field trip because even something as trivial as escorting the boys to the bathroom and making sure that they're safe, we don't get to do every trip.
Interesting.
And you could tell from her tone that it's a very rare occurrence for a dad to show up as a chaperone for a field trip.
Interesting. A couple of things you said, which is, so thank you for sharing your story and experience. You are literally, by showing up, redefining, again, redefining what it means to be the modern, in my terms, I say modern Asian female, modern Asian male. And I totally agree with you around the framing of our parents' experience and blaming and understanding that it was a completely different generation. And I have also done the work of undoing blame and saying they did the best that they could, which I truly believe in
Yeah.
my heart of hearts. They really did the best
Oh,
they
they
could.
did.
Absolutely. They are very much, it was a different mindset, different learnings, different way of parenting. And our job, or my job, is to have my own responsible owner's mindset and do better or do differently in a way that resonates with me. And so that's been the work that I do with my kids. I have three. I know you have kids of your own, and I love how you're rewriting that story. I want to touch on this too about personal branding because you do work in personal branding as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know quite a few of my clients, if not all of them, are really, in essence, whether they ask this directly or not, are saying, like, help me brand myself or have more presence, which is a form of branding. So, what would you share with our listeners around branding and tips and tools around that personal branding?
Yeah, I think it comes down to if everybody wants the tactical stuff. And then I have a very contrarian view on it, which is that if you get the mindset right, and if you get the inspiration and the intangibles, the tactical stuff becomes easier. And if I can plant the conviction in your heart that your story matters and every time you share it, you're helping somebody, you're going to care less about how you actually do it. Right. And for this, you borrow from how other people who are really good at marketing do it. If you look at people who are evangelists or preach a message, or people who are doing the brand work of large institutions that frankly have spent more money than you and I ever will on
Mhm.
getting a message across. If you believe in the mission, the minutiae of the details become less of a clutter in your head. And so when it comes to personal branding, it's not necessarily about what I do to portray what else about me. If I can get you to understand that value in your story in a way that can help the next person go through less crap to get to where you are, then you share with less discomfort about bragging. I know that the feeling of bragging or self centeredness is an extremely important thing in our community. We
Yeah.
feel icky about it. It feels
And
like bragging,
especially
it feels self
female.
centeredness.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But what if you knew that every time you posted something, every time you sent something, every time you talked about your own success, it actually wasn't about you. It's about the little girl, it's about your peers that need you to share it. And so my encouragement is think about, and all we need to, not all, one of the most important exercises that we can do individually is to take stock and to inventory the people who've helped us. So people help in our lives directly and indirectly. In direct form, we're thinking about the mentors who pulled you aside, right? The people in your family, your school, in your work life that gave you help, cheat codes, off the record advice. Indirectly are people that we learn from indirectly. Books, YouTube, podcast, maybe it's this show. There's a different lessons to be had there, but we'll start with the direct people who've helped you. Human life is an evolution. It's the evolution is even more amplified and more important from an immigrant perspective because we have had a different starting point, and so we need to move a little bit faster. Why wouldn't you want somebody else to avoid the lessons that you've had? Why would you want the next person to suffer the same crap that you did? It just doesn't make any sense. That's the whole point of community evolution. You need to tell the next person all the lessons and all the pitfalls and all the things that you dealt with so that they don't. For you to take
Yeah,
that
it's
stuff to your
powerful.
grave is the selfish part.
Yeah.
Let it all out. So there's the direct part, right? And again, everybody talks about, oh, I do this to make life for my family, to give my kids more opportunity. Yo, like between us and our kids, there's 30 to 40 years of people that need your help.
Yeah.
And then two, here's the other part. So if you are listening to this podcast and you're like, wow, so he says some insightful things, Jerry says some insightful things, I've learned something today. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. There's very little chance that we actually know who you are. I don't know when you're listening to this, and I don't know what you're going to do with this information. I have been moved in the same way from the books that I've read, from the podcasts that I've listened to, and the content that I've consumed. However, it does not change the fact that the message that they put out into the universe has changed my life.
Mm.
And so we put the two and two together. We have irrefutable evidence and conviction that your stories, your lessons, your perspectives, your words can change people's lives. We have to admit that. And then two, you don't know who is going to be moved. You don't know when, you don't know how, you don't know in what form. The only way for you to increase your chance of helping as many people as you can is to put as much content out there into the universe in publicly available and digestible forms through books, through podcasts, through writing, through emails, through LinkedIn, through Instagram, through whatever. It doesn't matter. Yeah, this is the best time yet in history for us to put content out there. And how you help people and what expertise you bring, that's your personal brand.
Oh,
So don't worry about. So I explain personal brand for 5 minutes without saying the word personal brand because it doesn't matter. The color schemes and the words, like, I'm not saying they're not important, but they become less important and they will figure itself out. Because at the end of the day, personal branding is a fancy word for reputation, which is a fancy way of saying, what do people know you for? And if people know you as a person that can help them navigate a career in whatever, fashion, healthcare, retail, if you can also help them in a sense of the context of who you are. And so if you, and I know a lot of our sisters feel this way about being the only or about being one of few in a given industry.
yep.
I get it. That's messed up. Turn that energy into making sure that the next person doesn't say the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you've been frustrated by being the only woman in room X,
My entire life.
and this is not a message of blame, this is a message of inspiration. What are we doing collectively to make sure that the next person never feels that way? And again, this is what we're all doing collectively in this space as coaches, as authors, as whatever, to make sure. And here's nerdy math. There's 8 billion people alive on Earth today. And some really smart person figured out that in the history of Earth, of whatever, there's been about 100 billion people who've roamed this planet, right?
Wow.
And so from a statistical perspective, we're rounding errors and we're non-significant, insignificant, sad. However,
Oh,
the phrase that gets people really feeling special is you're one in a million. And one in a million in of itself is statistically insignificant. But here's where the nerdy math comes in.
let's get to the good part, Jerry.
8 billion people on Earth. And if you're so special that you're one in a million, there's 8,000 people exactly like you.
Wow.
Meaning that your story, your perspective, your life, your everything is a hell of a lot more relatable than you ever think. And this all sort of ties into what we started the conversation with today about the attacks on the EI and us, and really being forced to think that there's one definition of what leadership should be, that there's no nuance or context in what success looks like. But there is, right? Because it does not help me how a privileged white man became a CEO, right? In this country. It does not. I used to believe that. So I used to listen to all, just go look at any top XYZ podcast. I listened to it all. And I kept telling myself, if he can do it, I can do it. And I was like, no, it doesn't. And again, this is not me putting myself down. So my point is that let's understand that your story has the power to help people that I can't, right? Because I am not you. The more alone you feel in thinking that you've had a unique experience, The size of your audience may not be the entire earth, but let me tell you, because I've received messages, and I know you have too, Sohee, from people who only you can help, for people who have never seen somebody like you speak on a stage, who have never heard a Korean person or a Thai person or whatever you are, whoever you are, grace that stage. That changes lives. That's the thing that changes lives,
Wow.
because they see in you what they've never been shown before. And the actual dangerous thing about this anti-DEI thing is that we are conditioned to think that every person or position of power influence in this country should look like one thing. And
Yeah.
it is not.
Yeah.
I've had students walk up to me after sessions crying. It's not a point of bragging,
No.
right? But it means that they've lived years. They've gone through so many of these trainings. I've done sessions on Asian American leadership at companies virtually, and I'll get messages from people saying, I've worked here for 20 years, have
Yeah.
never been to an Asian American thing, and I feel
It's
seen.
It's so incredible to me what you're talking about. Like you said, personal branding without saying the word. And the most important part of that, I'm closing my eyes now because there's so much you said in this. It's the mindset of serving others and less about you as the person, which takes the ego part out of it, which stops a lot of folks.
It's not about us.
And
So,
that's exactly
like,
what I say. It's not about me.
but in the process, though, and then we'll wrap with this.
Yeah.
You also then have to be okay with accepting objectively, not subjectively, objectively, the impact you're having in the world. And you have to be okay with it. Because if you don't work on that mental part, then you get into a weird headspace of ego and
Oh, yeah.
humility being in imbalance, right?
Yes.
And so I've had people at restaurants turn and saying, "Oh, are you Jerry?" I had a woman run up to me on Broadway in New York City saying, "Are you Jerry from LinkedIn?
That's
Thank you."
incredible.
And again, it's funny, haha, and it's holy crap, that's interesting, a
Yeah.
little weird, and your friends or your family might give you crap because it's, oh, you think you're a celebrity now. And I was
Yeah.
like, listen, I appreciate all that, but here's the thing that I have to admit, that I have been given this gift and opportunity to help people, because for some reason she resonated with what I said. For some reason I have a followership, for some reason I have this gift. And you don't need to be me to be able to have that impact. You don't need to have started a podcast where you've had the former vice president on the show. You do not have to have a best-selling book. Everybody has your own way of being able to impact people in your own way in your own communities. And the thing that really gets me jazzed up is that as an Asian American person, let alone a man, just go to your local bookstore, just go look at any of the top 10 lists of podcasts and stuff. Does what's available out there in the marketplace today match the audience and the demand that we know exists for culturally resonant, relevant content that can help change lives? And the answer is hell no. We have so much opportunity. And so not only does it feel good in the heart, I actually think it's an incredibly opportunistic business opportunity for us to be able to help our people, because the gap between what's out there and what we know is needed is really wide.
Is
And think about it. Like, I don't know how many authors like me and you exist. How many Korean Americans have written nonfiction business books? Not many.
me and then you. And honestly, it's what keeps me going is when people say, I really feel seen and I really feel valued. It's the reason why I do this podcast. And what you said is so right. Keep going and keep doing the work because somebody will want to hear it and my other thing around this, Jerry, is to share it. If you're listening to this podcast and it resonates, share it with people. I've always said don't keep it a secret. That doesn't help anyone. Pass it along because it's in service of helping and empowering others. And I love how you brought it back to the top of our conversation around what lights you up, and it feels like a good way to wrap up this session. And thank you for being with us and sharing your perspective and your story and your experiences and your thoughts on personal branding, because I know a lot of people are curious about that. Where can they find you? Everywhere, obviously on LinkedIn.
At Jerry Wan universally.
Yeah,
LinkedIn is where I live. You can find me on Instagram or jerrywan.com.
yeah,
And yeah, and for one practical personal branding tip,
yeah.
if you believe in a platform, get your name at your name. For 10 years, I didn't own at Jerry Wan on Instagram because I didn't believe in Instagram when it came out. And then
Mhm.
I had to have my middle initial in there for about 10 years. And I bought my username on the black market a couple years ago. So I am, you can easily search me. But listen, you don't need to follow me or anybody to be inspired. The best thing that you can do if you're moved by this is to go post something yourself and go ask other people how you can help them. Because if you are listening to this, you are privileged. You have access to technology, you've done some stuff, and you are seeking out help to better yourself. You've
Mm,
already won.
yeah.
We've already won in life. And I know there's a lot of shit going on in the world right now that makes us feel otherwise, but you are in a position to help so many people. And I wish you all the success and the strength to be able to do that. And if I can be of help in any way, I'm more than happy to play a role. But Sohee, thank you for the opportunity to share my story a little bit with you. I'm incredibly proud of the platforms that you've built and the people that you've helped. And we're not done yet. And so let's keep helping other people and stay loud.
We are not done. Thank you for sharing your time and your experience with us, Jerry. Until next time.
Bye.
What a multifaceted and dynamic conversation that Jerry and I had. And I know for sure that there's something that he shared in his own personal experience, as well as his strategies around reframing personal branding that you resonated with. So here's something that jumped for me in terms of personal branding. Let's go there. And the reframe of how you're helping others, which really lessens the stress around, I will say, the stress and perhaps the humility around sharing your perspectives, what you're passionate about, what's lighting you up. So the reflection question I have for you today is, what is one way in which you can help others by sharing your experience or by sharing a perspective or thought? And what's the way in which you can do that? Is it through writing a newsletter? Is it through sharing your perspective at a meeting? Is it through sharing something with a loved one? It doesn't always have to be a big stage or written like in a book form. There are many ways in which we can uplift and help each other. And that's the key takeaway that I got from Jerry's talk today. He also helped redefine what it means to be a modern Asian male in today's society. And I really resonated with his mantra of show up so that others can see that it isn't always the stereotypical look, or for the lack of better word, stereotypical person that is in charge of the PTA or coaching or what have you. So, the second reflection question I have for you is, what are the ways that you can show up in spaces that we don't normally see people like us in? So, think about that. And perhaps you want to take a micro action forward in showing up in a way that you haven't before, so that we can rewrite the narrative, rewrite the conditioning of what it looks like to be a modern Asian female and a modern Asian male. So, Jerry is a keynote speaker, he's a speaker coach, he's a personal branding expert, and you can certainly find him on his website, jerrywan.com, and on LinkedIn as well. He's very active on LinkedIn as well as Instagram under the same names. It has been such a joy being in conversation with him, as he's the first, not the last, the first Asian male on my pod. And it was such a pleasure to pull the thread on so many themes, especially around what's lighting him up. And continuing the topic around sharing, don't forget to share this episode and please follow and rate. It is my mission and such a passion of mine to ensure that stories like Jerry's and the stories that you've heard on my other episodes are shared, because we need these stories more than ever. And I know that it will uplift and inspire, if not you, so many that need it right now, especially. So please rate, review, and share this episode with your entire tribe. And if you're looking for a good read or a good listen, if you're taking a walk outside, check out my book, The Aligned Mindset: Secrets of High Achieving Women for Navigating Work and Life. It's available exclusively on Audible and Amazon, and it is all about the mindset and the power of reframing. And I'm sure that you will take nuggets from it as well. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Thank you for listening and for leaving feedback. I read every single one, and I'm really grateful that you have joined me for this episode. Until next time, bye.